Welcome, listeners, to the Stories, Fables, Ghostly Tales podcast, the place where creepy storytellers come to share their stories, and devilish listeners enjoy the show. I'm going to start by saying this. Weed removal is exhausting. I've spent the past 2 hours after work removing what feels like 3 elephants worth of weeds from my backyard. Holy moly. Now though, I get to do what I love, but due to my excessive gardening today, this episode is going to be a little shorter than normal. So today, I have Chris Bryne with a series of short ghost tales, and also L.Gima's story about the Faceless Woman from Oahu Island in Hawaii. My Hawaiian might be a bit rusty, but hopefully I can get the pronunciations right. Correct me, L.Gima, if I'm way off. And before we sink our teeth into these stories, I need to thank the following people: Patrick McNamara, Chris Bryne, Sam Eames, and Megan Jones. Why? Well, they hopped on the Buzzfeed link and left a review for the podcast. In Google, if you type in Buzzfeed 2018 podcast, you'll find a website that allows people to leave a comment about their favorite podcast, but particularly podcasts of 2018 that are underrated. And they were kind enough to leave a review to put me into the running for being part of that community post. This means more exposure and will help the podcast out. I'll include the link in the episode notes, but if you want to, you can Google Buzzfeed 2018 podcast, and that's the easiest way to find the website and leave a review. So let me know if you have, so I can include you on a special shout out. Okay, lovely listeners, turn the lights off, the sound up, and get ready for something spooky. Short Ghost Tales by Chris Bryne. Liverpool Street. Unfortunate commuters had described witnessing a man in overalls patrolling the platform at night, as if he's waiting for a train. Making the story even more toe-curling is that the night shift workers who were renovating the station in 2000 claimed to have even spotted the ghost on CCTV. An employee went to investigate, and he said he saw nothing. Yet, his colleague insists he spotted an encounter between the two on camera. He said he saw the two stand side by side on the deserted platform. A second visit to the platform, and again, it came up empty, except for a pair of white overalls on a bench. Liverpool Street Station is said to have been built on a mass burial ground, giving birth to rumours of hundreds of ghosts roaming the local area. Bethnal Green. The haunting sounds of women and children screaming have been heard by countless witnesses over an extended period of time, though no one has ever seen where they emanate from. Passengers and station employees have spoken of blood-curdling screams filling the narrow passageways of Bethnal Green for many years. Investigations have confirmed that 126 women and children were among the 173 people killed at the station during an air raid test during World War II. The siren causing a mass panic, and people fled to the supposed safety of the underground. Due to the fear of bomb strikes, this led to hundreds of people being trampled to death in the confusion. King's Cross. A cosmopolitan young woman with long brown hair wearing modern clothing is said to walk the corridors of one of London's busiest stations. The lady is said to scream loudly with arms outstretched, but when people come to her aid, she disappears into thin air. The first sighting of this frightening apparition was in 1988, when a commuter saw a woman appearing distressed and walked over to comfort her, only to pass right through her when he reached for her arm. There have been many similar sightings since, all at the same spot. The infamous King's Cross fire of 1987 is believed to be the cause of these supernatural incidents, with many people suggesting she may have been one of the victims of the tragedy. Bank Station. Bank Station is said to be haunted by a sinister spirit dressed in black, known as the Black Nun, with numerous sightings and reports of unexplained stenches in the tunnels, not to mention an undefined but persistent sense of sadness noted by workers and commuters passing through the station. The first reported sighting of a spectral figure dates all the way back to the end of the 19th century, not long after the station opened. Believed to be the ghost of a lady of the cloth mourning the death of her executed brother who worked at the nearby bank, which gave the station its name. The Black Nun is said to have waited for him outside his workplace every day until she died over 40 years later, with her ghost continuing to look for her brother inside the station to this day. On an unrelated but equally creepy note, the foul smell may be explained by the bank's location. The bank is on top of a mass grave for plague victims from the 19th century. Farringdon. Known locally as the Screaming Spectre of Farringdon, this unseen apparition has been terrifying passengers for years. Her piercing screams send shivers down the spines of anyone unfortunate enough to be within hearing distance. Dating back to the early days of the Tube, this supernatural phenomena is reported as often now as it's ever been, with hundreds of witnesses confirming the horrific sounds. It is generally believed that this phantom is the ghost of a young Anne Naylor, an 18th century orphan who was killed by her employer at a London workhouse aged just 12. Her body was dumped where the station now stands, explaining the pained screams which continue to pass through Farrington's corridors. And our last tale by Chris Byrne is Covent Garden. One of London's most famous landmarks, Covent Garden's tube station has been the site of eerie goings-on for over half a century, with numerous witnesses claiming to have spotted a tall man in a hat, coat, and gloves stalking the dark tunnels of the underground, and even the staff restroom. Believed to be the ghost of a murdered actor who used to frequent the bakery which was knocked down to make way for the station. The menacing spectre has provoked numerous tube workers into requesting a transfer. Many claim the scary figure bears an uncanny resemblance to actor William Terrace, who was murdered in 1897 at the nearby Strand, giving rise to suggestions that he remains there in spirit to this day, looking to avenge his death. Thank you so much, Chris Burns, for sending these in. These tales are brilliant. Now, our next story is The Faceless Woman by L.Gima. Let's jump right in. The Faceless Woman from Oahu Island. I've totally forgotten about this famous ghost in Hawaii, Oahu Island specifically. She's called the Faceless Woman. This happened to my friend. I'm telling it in her place. My friend and I decided to go see a movie one night in Kahala. Side note, Kahala is where you would see the famous Faceless Woman. Her occurrence wouldn't be on certain days or times, they're all random. So anyway, we saw the movie and I drank a huge cup of soda without going to the restroom. So, at the end, you could imagine my urgency to go. I literally ran to the restroom, did my thing and went to wash my hands. I heard a faint crying coming from behind me. I look around under the stalls, but saw no feet. I thought it must have been from outside. I turned to rinse off my hands again, and there was a lady in a blue sequin dress. I'm not sure where she came from really. She was combing her hair frantically. Her hair was long, tangled, covering her face, and she was crying. I asked her, "Are you alright? Do you need some help?" She kept combing her hair in front of her face. I grabbed some paper towels, and as I was about to hand them to her, She lifted her hair out of her face, and I looked in the mirror. She had no face. Nothing. She turned to me, still crying, but louder. She reached her hands out as if to grab me. I fell right on my ass. I crawled backwards, away from her, screaming my head off. I looked down, and she had no feet. She was floating. I turned away from her and got to my feet and ran out of that restroom. I got outside and ran to my friend, all the while staring at the door, waiting for her to come out. But she didn't. From what I heard, she never comes out. She stays in there. I've never gone back to that restroom since. Some background here. She was a real person, not a folklore from Japan. Although there is a legend about a faceless creature that shapeshifts into human form called Mujina. She was called faceless in life because she had dishonored her family, and from then on she was known to be unknown to everyone, hence faceless. That is what was said around how she came about. I'm sure there's more to this story, especially of how she died, but no one really knows. Wow, just wow. Brilliant stories from brilliant listeners. Thank you so much, Chris Byrne and L.Gima, for these story submissions. They were just fantastic. And speaking of fantastic, if you have a story that's ghostly in nature, an account of where your skin started crawling, story-wise, not actually crawling, send it in to StoriesFablesGhostlyTales@gmail.com. You can send in one paranormal story or multiple. I am here to listen. If you're thinking, gee, story, I'm not sure if my story is good enough. If it left an impact on you or creeped you out, it'll leave an impact and creep us out, okay? Tomorrow I'm going to narrate a creepypasta just for your awesome ears, so stay tuned for that tomorrow. And this week I'll also be covering off iTunes thank yous. So please, if you leave an iTunes review, let me know who you are, because I'd love to thank you. And on that note, it is that time. This is the place where stories live, and you telltellers come to listen. Enjoy your day or night, and join me every weekday for our creepy tradition. And as always, till next time.